How can African nations make their voices heard in an international organization like the United Nations? We'll explain. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs explains what needs to be done to harness the power of the continent's youth. And Tanzania's foreign minister talks about the importance of foreign investment. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. As global leaders digest the fallout from a stormy United Nations General Assembly in New York this week, China is strongly denied accusations from U.S. President Donald Trump that Beijing is trying to interfere in the U.S. midterm elections in November. Meanwhile, the diplomatic tussle has intensified between the United States and other signatories over the future of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal as the U.S. prepares to hit Tehran with fresh sanctions. Henry Ridgwell has a report.
Donald Trump's accusations against China took many at the UN by surprise. In a news conference Wednesday evening, the president was asked what evidence he had to support his claim.
It'll come out. Yeah, I can't tell you now, but it didn't come out of nowhere, that I can tell you.
China strongly denies trying to influence US politics. Some analysts note Trump did not mention Russia.
It would appear that the allegation that Donald Trump made against China when he deliberately not mentioned about Russia really was to distract attention domestically in the United States. So the Chinese are rather upset about it, and I would expect that Putin in Russia is rather pleased about it.
President Trump's accusation, taken alongside the ramping up of trade tariffs, marks a significant escalation of tensions between Washington and Beijing.
The real issue for China is the status, the standing of President Xi and therefore the Communist Party in the country as a whole. President Xi cannot afford and therefore will not agree to, appears to be weak in front of an American onslaught like that.
Chairing a UN Security Council meeting Wednesday, President Trump set his sights firmly on Iran, accusing it of spreading chaos, death and destruction.
Because I think he is trying to appease the allies that he has in the region, the GCC, Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I think that is very important for him because he tried to repatch the bad relations or the tense relations that he had or that the allies had with Obama.
The 5 remaining signatories to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, Britain, France, Germany, China and Russia, want to create an alternative payment system to bypass US sanctions. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo Thursday reacted with anger.
By sustaining revenues to the regime, you are solidifying Iran's ranking as the #1 state sponsor of terror.
For his part, Iran's president praised efforts to keep the nuclear deal alive.
Until such time when we keep reaping the benefits promised within that agreement for our nation and our people, we will remain in the agreement. Should the situation change, we have other paths and other solutions.
The new sanctions are due to hit in November, and President Trump has pledged that they will be tougher than ever before. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, for more on Friday's activities at the UNGA, VOA correspondent Margaret Bashir joins me live from New York. Hi, Margaret.
Hey, Vincent.
Now, what are some of the themes that have been covered by African leaders who have already spoken at the UNGA?
Well, I think we've heard a lot about development and the need for peace and security to be in place so that there can be development and transformation on the continent. We've heard a lot about climate change, battling the effects of climate change. African countries are not big emitters of greenhouse gases which cause global warming, but they suffer the effects of it quite significantly. So there's been a lot of talk about asking for more money to mitigate the effects of climate change. And terrorism has been high on the agenda of a lot of the leaders in their speeches, combating Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Shabaab. So, and then today we heard from South Sudan's Vice President Taban Dengai. He spoke about the peace process there and said the government's committed to comprehensive peace. And he acknowledged skepticism from other countries, saying it would be different this time. He said he's asked why it will be permanent this time. And he said it will be because leaders' attitudes have changed. So we'll see about that.
Beyond that, we know that there also are other discussions on the sidelines. Could you mention a few that were significant?
Sure. Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, he's just wrapped up some meetings here in New York with the Ethiopian foreign minister and with the South African foreign minister. We don't have readouts yet, but I'm sure on the Ethiopian meeting they're discussing the new peace deal between Ethiopia and Eritrea, a really historic moment. And then there's also very high-level meetings going on certain issues like the Central African Republic. There was a meeting Thursday, 1 million people still displaced, about 600,000 refugees from the CAR. And the UN talked about greater coordination with the African Union, ECOWAS, and the UN, including the Security Council, to sort of get that situation back on track and to restore state authority being the top priority. And there was also a meeting today on Darfur. It's just about to wrap up, but we heard the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Amina Mohammed. She spoke about security situation really stabilizing in parts of Darfur, except around Jebel Mara. That still seems to be a bit of a hot spot. But she said there's still some grievances that remain unaddressed, such as sharing land and natural resources, the return of displaced persons, the proliferation of weapons. Those need to be addressed. And she said that the gains that have been made have been fragile and that the international community really needs to support them so that they become more permanent. And she said that a pledging conference is in the works for Darfur so that as the UN draws down there, you have the UN and the AU's hybrid mission, UNAMID. It's in the plans for that 14,000 strong mission to start drawing down. She said they're going to have a pledging conference so that there won't be any gaps and that the UN system will be able to step in.
Excellent reporting as always, Margaret. Thank you very much.
Busy day for Africa.
Very busy. Well, that's VOA's Margaret Bashir reporting live from the United Nations in New York. Now, amid the many important global issues being discussed at the UNGA, concerns voiced from Africa are often overlooked. Would a more united Africa with one continental voice command more attention at the UN? This is one of the topics I discussed on this week's Straight Talk Africa with a dynamic group of experts: Pauline Mchina, Africa representative, American Friends Service Committee; Kwaku Nwama, analyst and professor of School of International Studies at American University; and Nyaka Lagoke, analyst and assistant professor of history at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania.
For several countries to come together to agree on a single platform, it has to serve everybody's interests. These countries have their own national interests, and they are pursuing that. Now, if we can come together and agree on certain things, that will be fine. But not having continental unity doesn't stop you from, working on a common platform. You can do it. There's 54 countries over there. They can meet and agree on certain things.
You might have a platform. You may have an agenda that you think would be would be pushed through. But if you are not contributors to the United Nations, if you don't have to contribute, it means nothing. Yeah.
Yes. So for example, take the ICC problem that Africa has been having. Right. There's a lot of talk about it. I'm not going to get into that. But they tried to get Article 16 changed, and it was Kenya that pushed that. Many of the African countries that were supporting Kenya hadn't paid their dues, so they couldn't vote. So these are the things that happen. It's not just wishful thinking. You have to pay. You have to pay your share.
And let's hear from Nyaka, please. Yes, go ahead.
Of course, we have to take responsibility, and then we have to be better than that. I completely agree with you. But we should not just we should not be talking about African issues like in a laughable manner. Yes, the leaders that are there, and again, most of the leaders, I can say that, they have been placed there. So, like now things are changing, but we know that there are many leaders in Africa that were placed there, and then to serve the interests, of the Europeans. And that's also a fact, and we're not going to try and have a conversation about Pan-Africanism today. But my point is that, yes, we are right that people need to be united for a greater purpose. And yes, we have to fix our respective houses. I agree with that. But at the same time, and I'm going to seize the opportunity to talk about the reform of the United Nations, there is no way America is going to come and talk about democracy. They're going to put billions of dollars to promote democracy across the globe. And then on the international level, they want to act as like an autocrat nation, or those 5 permanent powers there, they want to dictate their worldview to the globe. This is also an issue. And as an African, and then we have to be jealous of our freedom, of our welfare, and we have to pause, and we have to ask them why they cannot use the democratic values at the level of the United Nations in global affairs. And that's a relevant question, and we have to ask that question.
And actually, that is perhaps something that we need to talk about. Do African leaders at the global level feel intimidated to address some issues before the powerful leaders of this world? Can they stand up to them and say, this is what we think you're doing wrong, and you better do things differently?
Some of them can, and some of them cannot, because of their own history and their behavior or practices at the country level. But some of them can, especially the new ones who are coming in that don't have, the baggage.
Yes. Before they get reminded that we subsidize your democracy.
But what's the purpose?
But I think, it's so critical for them to understand that if they don't stand together, they'll be defeated, and not to vote with their stomach.
Yes.
Most of the time, African countries vote or stand on certain issue based on the money they are receiving. So that dependency on these Western countries or China, for example, have to come to an end. We haven't even decided as a continent how we're going to engage China. Look, they're taking over Africa.
They have taken over.
But my point I'm making is, what's the purpose of speaking up if you don't have what it takes to be actually free? So take Ghana, for example. Kufuor gives this nice lecture to Macron on Ghana beyond aid and all that stuff. And then in the very next minute, he's asking for aid. So I don't care about, can you speak out? Yes, you can talk. That's easy. It's easy. And it's very easy to blame other people. The wounds that really matter are self-inflicted.
Well, Ethiopia's Attorney General filed terrorism charges on Friday against 5 suspects detained in connection with a grenade attack at a rally attended by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in June. According to a statement from the Attorney General's office, the suspects operated under the Oromo Liberation Front's name with the intention of giving the impression that Mr. Abiy lacked acceptance among Oromos. 2 people were killed and many others were wounded in the explosion in the center of Addis Ababa on June 23rd. The blast occurred near a stage just after a speech by Abiy to tens of thousands of supporters. The suspects are accused of targeting the Prime Minister with the aim of preventing his administration from governing the country. Prime Minister Abiy is the first ethnic Oromo leader in the diverse country's modern history. He has pursued a reconciliation strategy since taking power in April, including pardoning the exiled Oromo Liberation Front, which has waged an insurgency for self-determination for Ethiopia's largest ethnic group. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Thibault Naj, says the growing population of young Africans presents unique challenges for their leaders. In the part 3 of his interview with Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick, the Assistant Secretary says a big part of the solution is jobs.
We have to recognize the youth tsunami, which is going to sweep Africa between now and 2050. The continent's population is going to double, put in a number, billion. Most of Africa will be under 30, even under 15. And all these young people are going to want exactly the same thing that young people want anywhere else. They have access to the internet. They see how people live other places. So African governments are going to have to supply them with jobs, jobs, jobs. If they don't, it will be a very, very tough road, meaning millions of migrants going towards Europe, meaning fresh recruits for militant organizations, and for the African governments to supply jobs, 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 they're going to have to put into place the type of environments which attract outside investors. You know, again, fair competition. I don't care if they're American, I don't care if they're Chinese or from anywhere else, but the foreign direct investment will lead to jobs, and that could lead to a true, finally a true African century.
What is the United States willing to do to help? And I also want to ask you the YALI program.
Oh, the YALI program is phenomenal. That's one of the things that persuaded me to eagerly seek this position, because I had a chance to meet with the Mandela Fellows first in Nigeria when I was there briefly as a charge, and after that meeting I said, wow, I have never in my life met a sharper group of young people. And then I had the privilege of having them at Texas Tech when I was working at Texas Tech in charge of that program. And that just reinforced, I said, this is Africa's future. It's not the you know, the negative one with unemployment and militancy. This is a future with dynamic Africans who will take charge of their own future, produce millions of jobs with their entrepreneurship, and just lead to a much brighter future for all of Africa.
Ambassador Thibault Nage, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, that was U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Thibault Nage, speaking with Africa 54's A.D. Adams Fitzpatrick in New York. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, foreign investment in Tanzania. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In Nigeria, two main labor unions have started a national strike after negotiations failed with the government over better pay and conditions. Ethiopian Prime Minister is nominated for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize. In Tanzania, President John Magufuli and Prince William in England have had a meeting and discussed starting a campaign against the trafficking of wildlife. Democratic Republic of Congo, amid multiple arrests and public trials involving the prostitution of juveniles and lightly dressed girls accused of obscenity, lawyers and families of girls say it is an abuse of their rights. Finally, in Kenya, a transformation in the local art scene is underway as planned renovations begin at one of Kenya's oldest art spaces.
Well, after a months-long ban due to its lesbian love theme, the Kenyan film Rafiki, which means friend in Swahili, has premiered in Nairobi following a Kenyan High Court decision to allow the screening of the controversial film. Here's viewers Mariama Diallo.
Kenyan moviegoers showed up in large numbers for the screening of Rafiki, which was banned on the grounds that it promotes lesbianism.
I do think it was unfortunate that such a movie that got such world recognition didn't get its chance to debut and have the audience in Kenya enjoy it. So for us to be here now to enjoy the fact that this film is on is a stepping stone, I would say.
Another moviegoer says he found the movie realistic and gave the film a thumbs up.
It's about two people who care deeply about each other, and it's a forbidden love. It doesn't matter if it could have been a heterosexual story. It just happens to be that way inclined. But it's a story about love, about hopefully forgiveness and redemption. It's a good movie.
The temporary lifting of the ban will allow the film's director, Wanuri Kahui, to submit the work as the country's Oscar entry in the foreign film category. Muthoni Gatheka, an actress in the movie, is ecstatic.
I'm so glad the ban has been lifted, even if it's just for a week. But a week can move into a month, into a year. And even from the crowd that is here, you already see everybody is so excited.
On Friday, Kenyan Justice Wilfrida Okwani ordered the ban on the film lifted for just 7 days, the minimum requirement for a film to qualify for Oscar consideration.
Homosexuality is an issue that is a reality in the society, and the question which then arises is whether a film should be restricted merely because it depicts gay theme. My answer to the above question is to the negative, because one of the reasons for artistic creativity is to stir society's conscience, even on very vexing topics such as homosexuality.
Earlier this year, the film director and the stars of Rafiki walked the red carpet in France, where the movie became the first Kenyan film ever screened at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
While Tanzanian Foreign Minister Gaston Mahiga says Chinese investment is a big win for his country, but it's not the only source of outside business. VOA's Mkamiti Kibayasi caught up with the Foreign Minister, the UN General Assembly in New York, and asked him about foreign investment.
The significance of international trade cannot be overemphasized in economic relations and the development of each country. But all the challenge that Tanzania has to face, whether we are trading with China or we are trading with the United Kingdom or with the European Union, is that we have to depart from the traditional exports of unfinished commodities. And the priority we want to emphasize in the fifth phase government with industrialization is first and foremost to add value to the traditional agricultural and mineral products. And hopefully that will change the quality and the quantity of the trade content and the balance of trade between these two countries. No country can remain in isolation, but the trading agreements have to be revisited. For example, we are looking at the economic partnership agreements with the European Union so that there is a win-win situation and a fairly balanced relationship in the economic relations. And trade will also open opportunities for investments, technological change with emphasis on digital know-how and, of course, the smart technology of the computerized world. Tanzania should stand to benefit from all these latest developments by opening doors, but in a manner that will be beneficial and not an equal relationship with the other partners in the international community.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, that was Tanzanian Foreign Minister Gaston Mahiga speaking with viewers Mkamiti Kibayasi. Now, in less than 1 hour, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to take a controversial vote on whether to recommend Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. The vote comes 1 day after emotional testimony before the Judiciary Committee by Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford, who testified that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her at a party when they were in high school in 1982. Viewers Esther Githui Hewitt has more from the Capitol Hill on the Capitol Hill drama.
Kavanaugh testified the allegations of sexual misconduct against him by Ford and 2 other women have destroyed his family.
And what you're saying, if I understand it, is that the allegations by Dr. Ford, Ms. Ramirez, and Ms. Swetnick are wrong.
Yeah, that is emphatically what I'm saying. Emphatically. The Swetnick thing is a joke. That is a farce.
Ford, who was the only woman to testify against Kavanaugh, said there's no doubt a drunken Kavanaugh who pinned her down on a bed, groped her, tried to take off her clothes, and put his hand over her mouth to muffle her screams for help.
Brett's assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham lost his temper during his time to question Kavanaugh, accusing the Democrats of an unethical sham.
What you want to do is destroy this guy's life,
hold this seat open and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics.
Some people watching the hearings believe it was more about politics than getting clarity to the accusations against Kavanaugh.
That it is delving between putting a complainant on trial, this woman who's asking her question as if this is her deposition, but she's not represented, and also between like a party war. Like they're just kind of, well, the Republicans did this, the Democrats did that. Okay, but did this man do this to this woman? Can we figure that out?
The Judiciary Committee, with 11 Republicans and 10 Democrats, plan to vote on Kavanaugh's nomination Friday, and if approved, will send it to the entire Senate, which will begin procedural votes on Saturday.
Well, the entire U.S. Senate is expected to begin procedural votes Saturday. Late Thursday, the American Bar Association urged the Judiciary Committee and the full Senate to delay the vote until the FBI has time to do a full background check on the claims made by 3 women, including Kavanaugh's first accuser, Christine Blasey Ford. President Donald Trump nominated Kavanaugh to replace the retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. He tweeted that the judge showed Americans exactly why he was chosen. Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Every day, millions of South Africans rely on minibuses to get around. Known locally as taxis, the minibuses are the backbone of South Africa's transport industry. But even seasoned commuters are struggling to master the specifics of which routes, bus stations, or prices to use in the largely unregulated sector. Skona Khumalo is a 28-year-old tech innovator and one of the drivers of an app that aims to help commuters navigate through the maze. It includes a chat function that allows commuters to communicate with one another and talk about their daily taxi activities and travel issues. The function also includes a panic button for safety issues. Well, and finally, small transparent spheres filled with a drink could be the answer to the problem of plastic waste. That's according to their London-based developers. The biodegradable Uho balls, which resemble large bubbles, have a jelly-like membrane made of plant and seaweed extracts. Now, this makes them entirely edible, though company Skipping Rocks Lab says the membranes decompose after 4 to 6 weeks if not consumed. Now, they have partnered with a British sports drink maker to offer an alternative to plastic cups and bottles at marathons. A common sight following marathons around the world is a mound of waste plastic bottles used once and then discarded by runners. Maybe edible bottles could cut down on plastic waste. And that's what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night and a great weekend.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Lots of items are made from gold, like jewelry, coins, and medals.
Golden opportunity.
This sounds like a strange thing to be made of gold.
Jonathan, are you as excited as I am about the holiday next week?
I might be more excited. The holiday is a golden opportunity for me to catch up